in the middle of the yard with night danger. It's brisk this morning. For the first time, I really feel the pumpkin spice latte of Damocles looming over my head. The autumnal presence is palpable in the air. It's gonna get chilly soon. I'm happy about it. I like all the seasons. I like summer. I like it when it's hot. I like it when it's brisk and sharp in autumn. I like it when it's light and airy in spring, and I like when it's blistering and horrible and cold in the winter. It's a great thing about living in a place like Ontario is you get all four seasons, and they're all wonderful. Now, something that's been percolating on my mind for the past 2 days is a concern of maintaining a consistent setting, having a world that feels believable and real, that isn't too goofy or arbitrary. Verisimilitude as a desired outcome for your setting. And what I want to talk about today is the relationship between maintaining a consistent verisimilitudinous world and prep. The last 4 or 5 sessions of my own campaign that I've been running for my friends, we've done zero prep because I'm in the tail end of my education, of my degree, and so I'm writing papers and studying a lot, and I don't have time to prepare material or go over faction orders or anything like that. I can spare 4 hours on a weeknight to show up and run the game, but there's no prep involved. And so we've been relying very heavily on Appendix A and Appendix B to generate wilderness and dungeon environments to adventure in. But, and this has been to mixed success. Some sessions have been better than others, such as the Winds of the Dice. But aside from this, something that I've noticed is that to an extent, the activity of role-playing is, for players, somewhat reactionary. They are responding to the world. Which is to say that if you, as the game master, play the world in a way that is believable, but also just where there's interesting things happening for the characters, you'll get more in-character table talk. Like you'll get the players thinking and talking more in character, the more consistent that the setting is, the more that the GM is able to maintain the simulation of the world, the more that the players can enter the minds of their characters. Now, I experienced a really high degree of this when I ran a Star Wars game, because all the players were at one point in their life, whether they were when they were kids or when they were teenagers, or even still to this day, at some point were Star Wars nerds, and they'd played Knights of the Old Republic, they'd seen the movies, some of them had read some of the novels when they were kids, and so there was a really strong understanding of the setting at the table, and so people had a very easy time imagining themselves in that world because they knew what that world was like. And so we got a lot of role play out of that. We had some sessions where characters were behaving, players were behaving so in character and so consistently in character that we barely needed to resort to the mechanics of the game. Not often. The mechanics are still present, but this has been those Star Wars sessions are a stark contrast to what I have observed with my zero prep sessions in AD&D, where the game element of role-playing game has come front and center, because I'm using up a lot of my GM bandwidth to abduct and interpret the world that is being generated live at the table. The terrain, the settlements, the dungeons, the monsters, the encounters, everything's happening live. And so I'm doing a lot of the brain work of trying to interpret that and convey it to the players. But it means that the players aren't as intimately familiar with the setting, because who knows what they're going to find? Who knows what the state of the world will be as they cross into the next hex, as they enter the dungeon? What factions will emerge? What assumptions can be made? But also on my end, the juggling of world generation and dungeon generation procedurally live at the table reduces the amount of bandwidth that I have for playing the world, like actually playing the world from a role-playing perspective. Not a lot of NPCs have much to say, or I speak in abstract about what NPCs are after or what they want. And overall, just in a lot of ways, especially with the dungeon crawl, it gets a lot closer to a board game than a role-playing game. Just because as the game master, I can only wear so many hats at once. I can only spin so many plates at once. And if I'm trying to maintain a consistent and stable setting, I think there's ways that this could be mitigated. Where you could minimize prep and you could still do a lot of procedural generation at the table, while also having that consistency and that predictability that allows for role-playing to come naturally both to the GM and to the players. But I think there's some prep that becomes necessary in order for there to be no prep. Either populating and designing your own random tables for encounters, for terrain, checking for settlements ahead of time. Even if you're generating terrain live at the table on the hex map, checking the hexes in advance just to see if there's any settlements, so that you can start getting an idea of what that settlement might be and who lives there and so on and so forth. Yeah, I don't know. I just, we're all trying new things. We're experimenting with our games, pushing boundaries. How little prep can you get away with? How much prep can you do before you get diminishing returns of benefit? These two outer boundaries. I think that there's got to be a medium, because just to be very frank, I've had a lot of fun. I had a lot of capital F fun at the zero prep sessions, running them, generating these dungeons, generating these encounters. But something's missing. There is the stakes and the through lines of consistency are missing in these zero prep sessions, and it makes the world feel a little shallow, a little thin, and it's harder to take it seriously. And so it turns into more of a beer and pretzels experience. Now, I was getting a lot of very low prep with still high world consistency and high role-play engagement, when the world was being generated not by tables, but by faction action, by the players submitting faction orders, and this causes things to happen in the world emergently, that I can then just pull from and use at the table very freely and with very little prep work. Very little session prep work. There was still a good amount of work outside session for me as the GM in receiving and processing these orders. It offloaded a lot of the brainstorming onto the faction players, but I still had a decent chunk of prep work to do in just interpreting the orders. I'm a little tired. The coffee isn't doing its job yet. This is a very loose video. I don't have a strong thesis. But setting coherency is the subject on my mind lately. And I'm not so convinced that a pure roguelike generative zero prep game can produce this consistency that I desire. Both as a GM and as a player. I play in a friend's game, and his setting he's been running it for years. And he does a fair amount of prep, and he has a fairly big idea of where things are going. And it's an absolute delight to play in his games, because the world behaves in consistent, predictable fashions, and that gives me a lot of agency as a player. It gives me a lot of agency when the world responds to my actions believably. And believable response to player action is very difficult to just automate with random tables. It requires a GM who knows his setting really well and is able to convey that to players in a way that isn't incredibly boring. This recording feels very much like a stream of consciousness. Like sometimes I just open up my notebooks and I just start writing words down and ideas across multiple pages, and then a week later I'll return to those notes and build something coherent out of it. But I had an opportunity. It's such a beautiful morning. I had an opportunity to record something, and frankly, this is perhaps a recording that I'll get more benefit out of than anyone else will, by virtue of just going back and listening to it over again. But either way, it's been this is such a comfortable place to sit. This hammock is just incredible. Yeah, I'm just going to stop here. This has been Night Danger, sitting in the middle of his yard, having a delicious cup of coffee. And I hope you're all as ready for the fall as I am. Adios.